Hey everyone, I'm Haley. This is Bitter Kitten Crafts. This is a channel where we talk about knitting and crocheting and yarn, and I just wanted to share with you guys what I've been working on because I started a bunch of new projects. So let's just get into it with my whips. First of all, this is the sweater that I finished last episode, and I'm finally wearing it, and it's pretty much exactly how I wanted it to fit, and I'm definitely going to be using this pattern again, but my cat's in the way, so Hey everyone, I'm Haley. This is Bitter Kitten Crafts, and this is a channel where we talk about knitting and crocheting and yarn and all the stuff I love to make. So let's go ahead and jump in with the things I've been working on because I started a bunch of new stuff and I'm excited to show it to you. So before we kind of get started with all my whips that I started, I wanted to show the sweater. So this is the sweater I finished in my last video, and it is the Stanford sweater by the Knit Purl Girl, and her version is like a solid version with like a deep Henley, but I ended up making a cardigan version, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I love the fit of the collar, and I love the kind of tapered sleeves with the balloon, and I really just love the big blue buttons. So I'm so happy with how this turned out. As you'll see with some of the projects I started, I'm like a serial pattern repeater. So I'll definitely be using this pattern again, probably. So I did like a full cardigan version, even though the sweater design is a Henley. And I think probably for my next version of the sweater, I'll do a Henley version and not leave it fully unbuttoned, and it's less purling. So let's go ahead and get started talking about all my whips because I'm so excited about all of them, and I'll show my FOs at the end because I only have two little tiny ones. So you just see my cat jump. But the first one that I have is, this is the Bennet Sister Shawl, and the designer is Lindsey Fowler, and I have made a ton of progress, which I'm really happy about. And this is, I'll put like a photo. This is my 5th version of this shawl, where you knit one half with like maybe a solid or like a variegated color, and then one half with that same color or a similar color held with mohair. And so for this one, this is, you can kind of see also there's like a garter stitch section and then a stockinette section, and I've just kind of reached the stockinette section, so I'm like a quarter of the way done, and you can kind of see just that little triangle of stockinette there, and it'll slowly progress into a big diamond in the center of stockinette. And the yarn that I'm using is something I'll talk about in a minute. So for the other half of the shawl, I'm planning to use this color held with this mohair. Oops. And these are both from my stash. So this mohair was from somebody else's stash actually, and it was gifted to me. And I think it's so beautiful, but I've had it lingering in my stash for sort of a long time. I'm trying really hard not to buy any new yarn in 2025, with the exception of the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. So I'm really kind of scavenging through what I have to see what I can combine. And I'm ending up with, as you can see, a lot of like striped stuff and a lot of like kind of fun colored stuff like this bright pink that I just haven't used yet. So I'm really happy with my color choices. So this is another stash yarn, and this is, let's see. So I'll go ahead and talk about this now. So I worked for a yarn company up in Maryland for a long time, or a long time ago, not for a long time, for a very short time. And I had a very negative experience working for them, and they're a pretty large hand-dyed yarn company, and recently there was a Craft Snark post about them that I commented on, and it seemed like the owner of the company made a Reddit account just to comment back to me about like negative things and tearing women down, even though the reason that I didn't work for them for very long is because she was consistently tearing women down. So I'm not going to say the brand, but I am going to try to use up all the yarn I have from them in my stash so that I just don't have to like think about them anymore, because now I live a little further south in Maryland and I just have a lot of negative associations with that company. So if you want like more information about that, definitely feel free to look on Craft Snark, because I left a long comment. But anyways, this yarn's not from them. This is from someone else's stash, one of my friends. She gave it to me, but it didn't have a label. So it's just this like very muted, very softly dyed, pinkish yellowish mohair that kind of matches perfectly with this. And then I was hoping, I don't know, I'm not sure if this will actually end up working. I'm hoping that it will be like one side is like, bam, like neon, you know, you can kind of see the colors like very uneven, but that's okay. I'm really hoping it will be sort of less noticeable when it's blocked. But yeah, this bright pink and then this kind of muted pink on the other side with the mohair, and hopefully it will kind of tone down this neon pink, because at first I was considering doing a neon purple held with this mohair, and I figured it would just be like too much and not really that wearable. So hopefully this is a way to get this yarn out of my stash with something wearable. So far I really am enjoying knitting on it, which is why I've knit 5 of this pattern, but I'm not loving, honestly, the speckling in this yarn. It's kind of crazy. And this is a yarn that was specifically dyed for the store Do You Knit in New Jersey. It's, their color is like always pink. So that's why this is such bright pink. And this is how much yarn I have left. So my intention is probably to knit the entire skein of this up and then switch to decreasing with these. That's kind of how the pattern goes. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention about this project. So I'm using these needles. They're called Prim needles. I think you can see it there. I'm using size 6 needles. I don't know, that might be really tiny, sorry. But I'm using these size 6 Prim needles, and they are plastic. And so they've been a really good purchase. I purchased them a couple summers ago from Michael's because I was traveling and I was worried about my needles getting confiscated. And so I have them in size 6 and size 8, and I'm using size 6s for this project. I've been really happy with them. They kind of look like little like drumsticks on the end. They have like a little rounded tip. And I've actually really enjoyed knitting with them, kind of more than I was expecting to. They really don't impede my kind of knitting flow like a wooden needle does, but they're obviously like a better choice for, you know, like when I bring them to nannying and stuff. I feel better about having this than having like sharp needles in my bag. So they've been a really good purchase. So if you're in the market for needles that aren't wood, but you don't want metal needles, these Prim plastic ones are actually a great choice. I know they also make ergonomic crochet hooks, but I haven't tried those yet. So if you were wondering about my granny square blanket, I'm also really like nearing the end of it. I didn't bring any squares over, but I did bring over this ball of yarn. So I wanted to talk about also, I think it's important to share, like when you frog a project, I think it's important to talk about frogging as kind of a natural part of knitting things. And I'll put a photo here. I cast on a hat with this yarn. I showed it in my last video as something, or in one of my videos as something I wanted to cast on this spring. And I cast on the classic ribbed hat by Purl Soho with it, which is just like a 1x1, very basic free pattern ribbed hat. And it ended up that this yarn microstriped with the yellow and the pink, which I really wasn't expecting at all. And I hated. I felt like it was really not wearable and kind of like not what I was expecting at all. I was expecting it to do the kind of pooling where it like flashes because there's really large chunks of color in this worsted weight yarn. And I really hated knitting with it because it was very plasticky, and it is 100% superwash wool, but I just ended up ripping out my hat, and I ended up just kind of committing to putting this in my crochet blanket. And I'll put a photo of the square also that I finished with this yarn just to kind of test it and make sure that was the right choice. And it's definitely the right choice. I do wish there was more pink because in the skein it looked more pink, and now it's kind of like this really weird chartreusey pale yellow color is actually the primary color once it's knit or crocheted, which I really hate. So this is like some deep stash yarn, but I really think it's important to talk about, you know, not just the wins of knitting, but the losses. This was like definitely a failed attempt at a project, so I'm glad I didn't get that far into the hat. I did also start a second shawl. This shawl is a bit more intricate than the other shawl. So this is the Zarya Shawl by Ambah O'Brien. Oh, and this is the back. So this is the front. You can see my mosaic section. Oops, let me move my ends. You can see my mosaic section and my lacework sections, and then you can see my color change here. And so this is a fingering weight pattern, and I'm using 100% alpaca yarn. And this is yarn that I got on my bachelorette party where we went to go pet alpacas in like rural Virginia, and they're both undyed colors from the natural alpaca that I met that day, which is awesome. And I only had one skein of the white, and I have 2 skeins of the dark brown. And I have made some color changes to kind of accommodate for the fact that I only have one skein of the white. So you can kind of see here, there's this like natural progression of like the dark brown to the mosaic to the white, and then there's a harsh line here. And the reason I paused this project is because I did switch from white to dark brown here, and that's not what the pattern suggests, but I'm kind of trying to conserve the white yarn. Hello, boo. So this is supposed to be knit on a fingering weight gauge, and I'm knitting it on more of like a worsted weight gauge. There is a DK weight shawl that comes with this fingering weight shawl pattern, but I wanted to cast on the fingering weight version and see how far I could get, because I do have about 900 yards of yarn, and the fingering weight version requires about 800 yards of yarn. The only issue is that I have 2 skeins of this dark brown. I know it kind of reads black, but it's really dark brown. You can see all the like little plant bits and stuff. And I have only 1 skein of the white. It's a natural undyed alpaca, you know, from the alpacas I met at my bachelorette party, because I just got married in November. And so this harsh stripe here that you can kind of see the harsh color change, that's not part of the pattern. That was just me attempting to conserve the white yarn. So the next section is this mosaic section here again. And I'm really hoping it will look okay, but I kind of paused it because I was worried about the harshness of that line. And I really... maybe I'm like overthinking it, but I think that it will be okay. And so this pattern has been lovely to knit. It's very fun. I love mosaic knitting. It's one of my favorite things. And this is obviously like 1 by 1, you know, it's a very easy slip stitch pattern. And the eyelets are also, you know, if you've knitted any eyelets before, you know, like this is a pretty easy eyelet situation. I'm really hoping that I'll have enough yarn if I make these adjustments to the pattern. And we will find out together if I will, but it's seeming like switching colors kind of more often will be the way to go. The reason that I cast on the other shawl is because this shawl is, while it's beautiful and while the patterns are easy, the way the pattern's written is that every single row is written out, and it's been sort of hard to like transport this situation basically anywhere, because it's sort of just like you have to keep track of which row you're on, and I have been struggling to stop in the middle of a section and like remember which row I'm on and which repeat of the row, because it's like repeat rows 1 through 6 4 times, like kind of like that. So I've been really struggling to like maintain kind of a flow of working on this, but I'm hoping I'll make some more progress soon. And because I'm knitting on size 7 needles and the pattern suggests size 5, it's been growing like a lot, which I really like. I love like a huge drapey shawl. And so I'm really hoping this will be kind of a beautiful memento of just like reminding myself of the time of getting married, because it's from my bachelorette party, and hopefully it'll be like a beautiful kind of heirloom piece in my wardrobe. And knitting with 100% alpaca has been lovely, so lovely. I'm going to talk about my last major whip, and then I'll get to my FOs, because I was just so excited to talk about my whips that I put them first. So this is a sweater for my husband, and this is the Flax DK, and this yarn is Berroco Vintage in the colorway Cerulean. So I have a skein of it here, and this is Vintage DK. So this yarn is acrylic wool and nylon, which is good for like the man in your life, to be honest. This was a very budget-friendly yarn, and it was also it's machine washable just in case, and it's pretty hardy. I've knitted a couple sweaters with it before. Actually, this dark blue yarn here is this same yarn, and I really enjoy working with it. Some acrylic blends, they're like kind of plasticky. Even some yarns that are really heavily superwashed are kind of plasticky, but this yarn is actually surprisingly not plasticky at all. And I'm knitting it on size 5 needles, so it's a little bit slower going than I had hoped, because this is the size 3X. But I did slipper sleeves, finally! And I have both my sleeves, and I have a huge collar, so my next step is going to be picking up the collar before I continue with the body, just to kind of get like an assessment of how much tighter I can make it. I'm hoping to pick up 2 out of every 3 stitches, and like that'll cinch it up enough, but I'm not actually sure. So I'm really hopeful on that. I did do the short rows, so I guess this is the front. Well, honestly, you can't tell, to be honest. This could be the front or the back, but I did do the short rows, I did do like the garter welts on the sleeve, and I'm planning to make this a full long sleeve sweater, so I have 5 more skeins of yarn to go. I just wound up my third. So this was exactly 2 skeins. Oops. This was exactly 2 skeins of yarn. So this is like the end of my second skein. And I have, let's see if I can show it. I have this much under the armpit knitted, literally 4 rows. So if you're knitting this sweater in size 3X, keep in mind that you will eat up yarn for the yoke. Like knitting the yoke on this was frankly exhausting. It was like over 500 stitches and it was like just a lot of knitting. So I'm really happy to be at the body now, and knitting sleeves is sometimes something I struggle with. So I'm trying to not allow myself to cast on a sweater for myself before I complete at least the body of this. And that has resulted in me casting on 2 shawls because I just couldn't handle working on this solid blue color over and over and over. It was just really, I love color. And so knitting one solid blue sweater was like boring. So no offense to my husband, but you picked a boring color. So hopefully I'll just make a big old dent in this. I'll have to bring it like to work and stuff so that I don't have a choice but to work on this and maybe make some progress on the body. My new FOs are also new cast-ons, which is kind of why I saved them to the end, because they're both tiny little cast-ons that I started in the past 2 weeks and also finished in the past 2 weeks. One of them took me 1 afternoon and one of them took me like 2 afternoons. So one of them is this, and I know it looks like nothing. It looks like a tiny little hot water bottle cover. This is the Airpod Cozy, so these are my AirPods in here. And this is a pattern by Olga Olach, and it's a free pattern on Ravelry, and it's so cute. This is one of the most sort of practical things I've ever really knitted like this, because one can only use so many sweaters. But this yarn is from Yarn Hero. It was a skein of their mill ends, and you can kind of see, I was really hoping that it would fade more quickly, but it faded sort of slow, so it's mostly purple, and then the bottom edge is blue. And you knit it, I knitted it on size 1 needles using magic loop, where I made this little cuff for it so that it folds down. And my AirPods are like really not going to come out like at all. Like I really have to kind of squish them out. But I love the practicality of this because I've been throwing my AirPods in my purse, and there's just a lot of like crumbs that get in there, or you know, my cats go in there, and my nanny kids go in there, and there's just a high likelihood that like junk and gunk gets in there. But now they have a little house and they have a little sock and they're fully protected, and it was a really easy knit. You know, it's very much just like 2x2 ribbing, and then you increase by 4 stitches on each side, and then you decrease and do Kitchener stitch at the bottom. And it was a really, really easy little pattern. So I highly recommend knitting an AirPod cocoon, an AirPod sock. I found 2 patterns for this type of project on Ravelry. One has mohair and one does not. And I ended up choosing the one without mohair at a much tighter, I mean, this is like a Teflon gauge. I chose the one without mohair because I know that mohair can kind of attract like crust and must. Like if I throw this in the bottom of my purse, there will definitely be crust and must glued to the mohair. But this is just 100% superwash merino, so it's pretty like flat and smooth, but I don't think it will attract much ick. But look how cute it is. It's a little guy. So speaking of little guys, I knitted the tiniest little guy of all time. Look at him. Look at him. He's so tiny. He is so tiny. So if you've been watching my other videos, you know that I've been knitting these guys. These are little kindness monsters. And the pattern's by Rachel Borello Carroll, and her is Yarnigans. And so in my last video I said I wanted to make an even tinier version, and I succeeded. And so this is knit on size 3 needles, and you can maybe see it's fingering weight held double. And this is knit on size 1 needles, and it's fingering weight held single. And it's actually the same yarn that I used for all 3 of these projects. So you can maybe kind of tell like this is where the end of this project ended, and this is where the beginning of him started. It's like the same purpley bluish model, and he has tiny little ears. ears and his hat. And so this is like also the same yarn, but this is held with a white fingering. So you can kind of see maybe like his legs are that same purple. And I really have been, like I mentioned, trying to use up all the random yarns I have in my house. Trying to avoid purchasing yarn. Not that I would purchase yarn to knit a little guy like this, because that would be silly. But I just, look how tiny he is. He's so cute. He's slightly crooked, like his ears are not even, which I kind of just love for him. He's so stinking cute. This is easily my favorite one of these that I've made, and I'm so, so happy with him. I love him. I want to knit so many of them, and they don't take that long, like I said. So typically I'll knit his whole body and like legs and arms and ears in one afternoon, and then the next day I'll knit the hat, because the hat does low-key take longer than you would think, because it's like 1x1 ribbing, and it's, yeah. And the beauty of these little guys is that they're knit flat and seamed, so it really is not that hard. You know, you don't have to worry about struggling with magic loop on like what's like really so tiny few amount of stitches, and you don't have to just stress. And even his hat is knit flat. So I've been having, oh, here's even, I have another one. They're like everywhere all over my apartment now, because I've knit a bunch of them, and I'm not going to stop. So my next plan is to knit a gianter one with worsted weight held double on like size 7 needles probably, and just see like maybe I can knit a whole stuffy. And then this guy is like the baby brother of this guy, because they're the same yarn, and they're so cute. And so basically I'm going to keep going until I run out of safety eyes, because why not, right? And they're really cheering me up and bringing me joy, which everybody needs a little joy right now, right? Look at him. And the size difference is pretty neat. So what's really cool is like these are size 3 needles, which are pretty significantly small, right? And this is size 1 needles, and I was not expecting him to turn out this tiny. He is so tiny compared to his big brother. Look at him. He's so tiny, because this is knit on size 5 needles, and this guy is not proportionally as small, if that makes sense. So this guy was knit on size 5 needles, and I was expecting more of a similar transition between sizes, because size 5 to size 3, like there's actually not that much of a size difference. There's like probably a 1/2 inch size difference, but not that dramatic really if you look at them like next to each other. But then when you go down to size 1, I mean, he's like half the size. So I'm kind of obsessed with that. I really wasn't expecting him to be this significantly tinier. And now I want so many tiny little ones. Like everybody's getting these in their stocking this Christmas. Like look how cute he is. And I've been using this Yarn Hero scrap that I have. So I probably have like 50 grams of it left. And I could probably knit like 4 or 5 more of these guys. So yeah, so everybody's getting kind of matching little guys, which I love. Look at him. Look at his little booty. He's so cute. I love that his legs and his arms are kind of the same shade, but slightly different. And then when you take off his hat, he has a purple little head. So he's kind of the most successfully fading guy that I've done so far. But I hope that if I continue to use the Yarn Hero skein, he will have brethren that are similarly faded. Let me put his hat back on. So his hat has like ear holes in it. I don't know if you just saw me pull it through. He has little ear holes in his hat, and you just kind of stick his ears through and pull his hat back on for him, and then he's like good to go. And the only tricky thing is sometimes putting on the safety eyes through the knitting. At the size 1 gauge, it was a little easier, but at the size 5 gauge, the safety eyes were a little harder because like the stitches are looser, obviously. So that's just something to keep in mind. This is a free pattern. Everybody should make these. I'm obsessed with them. I'm going to make, so far I've made 4, including my teeny tiny one. I'm probably going to make like 100. I only had 2 FOs this week, and they were both tiny. Next week I'll probably have like maybe 0, maybe 1, maybe. If I finish all the squares for my blanket, I guess I might count that, but I have 6 left only. So I don't know. I still have to sew the entire thing together. I don't know if that counts. But I do have one future plan for a sweater for myself when I finally make enough progress on my husband's sweater, or I might start it early because we're going on a road trip next week. So I might start it for that, but that would be like irresponsible because I could get so much work done on his way. Okay, anyways, I'll show it. So similarly to what I was talking about earlier with the company I used to work for, I've been trying to kind of get that yarn out of my stash just because there's like so many bad vibes around it. And so I'm gonna go ahead and take the labels off just so that I can talk about it without feeling any kind of way. But this is going to be the coloring book tee by Aimee Sher, and I'm gonna put a photo of the finished pattern here, but I'm gonna change the colorway striping a little bit. So in her view, she has thick stripes towards the bottom, and my plan is to do kind of micro striping of this brownish purple and this speckly white. So I cast on this sweater like a year-ish ago, but I messed up the stitch count kind of badly with the short rows, and I just really didn't like how it was turning out because I did not choose to stripe it. I chose to do this color as the solid body color, and if you notice, it's like sort of close to the color of my skin. So to alleviate that, I picked up out of my stash some browns that kind of go with it. And I'm going to do a micro striping situation. What I'm hoping is that some of the micro stripes will kind of blend together because you can see in the white there's those really dark speckly patches that are dark, dark, dark brown. And I'm really hoping that it will almost look kind of like one color. My cat's screaming. It'll almost look kind of like one color because of the amount of really dark speckles in this white yarn. And I'm dying to cast this on. I am so excited to cast this on. What's wrong, boo? I'm so excited to cast this on. I don't think I'll finish it in time for it to be cold enough to wear it here because like late March is already kind of like the warm weather in DC. It gets like real humid real quick. But I think it'd be a lovely spring project to work on. The yarn is cashmere blend. It's like a MCN cashmere, so it's really soft and lovely. And like I said, I really feel the need to get this yarn out of my house and into something wearable that I can actually use. And honestly, the color's stunning. Like, this color, it's stunning. And again, if you have like more questions about that, definitely DM me. I'll be knitting, I think I might have already said this, I'll be knitting the 54-inch bust on size 4 needles, which is the recommended needle size. And I have almost exactly a 50-inch bust, so I'll have about 4 inches of positive ease, which is about what this sweater has too. And I really like that kind of drapey, oversized fit on me. I have a bigger bust, so when things have tighter ease, it's like, I just don't always love how it looks. So I'm really excited to have just another, like, this will be a really basic staple in my wardrobe, these two together, and I can just wear it with jeans in the fall, which is sort of my exact plan. The only thing I have left to show is one skein of yarn that I've been gifted, and I think I mentioned earlier in an episode that I helped a neighbor, an older neighbor, move out of her apartment in my building, and she gifted me a bunch of craft supplies that have been really cool and kind of unique stuff, including like a vintage sewing machine, which I'll have to show at some point, but she gifted me this skein of yarn, which is one of the craziest skeins of yarn I've literally ever seen in my life. Oh my god, my cat's going insane. She gifted me this skein of yarn, and it's bananas. It's called Cool Stuff Cotton Viscose Nylon Custom Dyed Yarns. Look at the price of it. What the heck is this stuff? $77 for what? I don't know. I really don't know how to use this. I know it's a beautiful art yarn, and it is like a cotton blend, and look at all the cool, like, crazy fibers inside there. It's really something. But I don't really know how I would knit with it. I was thinking of maybe trying to like stripe it in or hold it with a white fingering weight wool to kind of see what happens. It's very much a lot of weight. It says it's about 300 yards and it's about 6 to 8 ounces of yarn. So it's a pretty dense, bulky weight fabric. What I haven't figured out is, like, I'm assuming that, see that thread? Like, I'm assuming that it's maybe double stranded or something, but I really don't know. So please give me suggestions on how to use this. It was really, really generous of her to give it to me, and it's super neat, but I just, like, what the heck do I do with it? I love the colors, though. I love the color story. I love aqua. Yeah, please give me suggestions on how to knit with this. This is kind of what it looks like. There's, like, some really thick bits here, and then there's some literal thread. So I really just have no clue what to do with this. It might be neat to stripe it into a sweater and do like stripes of this and stripes of like a solid blue. I just really don't know. I just really don't know. But that's a pretty cool acquisition, especially considering I have not purchased any yarn in 2025 so far, except to knit my husband's sweater. Yeah, this is a pretty neat thing. It says copyright 1994 on the tag, so do with that what you will. This cost $77 in 1994. Like, holy bananas, this is some nice yarn. But anyways, me and my little guy are gonna wish you goodbye. Have a great couple weeks until I see you again, and happy knitting.